Merry Christmas, everybody. Okay, how many kids are out there? How about this? How about we get kids who are like under the age of 10? If you want to, come on up here. I got some questions for you. Come on, y'all. You're going to have to be at church get to be at church on Christmas morning. Then let's do something with this. Okay. How many of y'all have got to open your presents yet? All of them? You've opened all of your presents? What did you get?
I got some little Spideys.
Some what?
Some Spidey characters.
Oh. What about you, Jill?
2 remote control helicopters.
Yeah. What?
A Lego set.
A Lego set? What kind of Lego set? Marvel. Okay, that's good Lego.
An Encanto playset.
A what playset?
An Encanto playset.
Oh, Encanto, the movie. Okay, gotcha. All right. That's right. We don't talk about Bruno.
A Lego set.
A Lego set. That's a popular gift. What about you?
A Nerf gun.
A Nerf gun. Have you shot it yet? No, that's waiting after church. Yeah.
Lego set.
Yeah, you did.
My gift was the best. I got socks.
What about you, Kingston?
Skateboard.
Oh, yeah. All right.
PlayStation 5.
What? And we're all coming over to your house afterwards, right? PlayStation 5. Okay, so did your parents put lights up on the tree? Or not, did your parents put lights up outside the house?
Yes.
No. Yes, yours did? Are they pretty? Yes. Anybody else? Kingston, yeah. You got too much. Well, that seemed like a saucy comment. What?
I got 2 trees instead of my grandma doesn't has trees. But
She didn't get a tree and you got 2?
Instead 2 years.
Did you get Miss Mildred's tree?
No.
Okay. Okay, you guys, thank you so much for sharing with us what you got. Y'all can go back to your parents. Let's thank them. So, I have to ask my kids if I can tell a story about them, and if I don't, I have to pay a hefty fine. So I asked Hannah this morning if I could tell a story about her, and she said, yes, if you point to me and tell everybody it's my birthday. So, Hannah's birthday, and the reason I'm okay with doing that is because the story is about it being her birthday, because when she found out that Christmas was on her birthday this year, here's what she said. 364 days a year I wake up, and it is not my birthday. And one day out of every year I wake up, and it is my birthday. And I would like to not go to church on that birthday. Now she's changed her mind because of the socks we got her. So, okay, let's show of hands. How many people raise or put lights outside their house? Okay, overachievers. No need to brag about it. How many of y'all have Christmas trees up? Okay, yeah, that's a more normal, less. Have you ever thought about how weird stuff like this actually is? I mean, you just kind of uncritically accepted it, right? Like, we're gonna put trees up, and we're gonna take lights outside from inside our house, outside of the house, and we're gonna take a tree from outside of our house and put it in our house, which is a weird thing to do. Jim Gaffigan, the comedian, talks about how most of us don't realize how it seems like our traditions were invented by people who were not sober. Like a wife comes home one day and, why is there a pine tree in my living room? Don't worry, I'm going to decorate it for Jesus. You know, that's... But you know how these things happen. Europeans, back in the 15th century, they realized that Christmas Eve was the darkest day of the year. It was when it was the most cold and the least fertile. And they brought in an evergreen into their living room to remind them of the faithfulness of God. that God is always in the business of turning things from darkness to light. That's why we hang lights up every year. There are a lot of things we don't pay attention to, like candy canes. Do you know what those mean? What? No, they just mean candy cane, right? No, they're in the shape of a shepherd's crook, like the story that we believe happened. And so the Christmas story is littered throughout our culture and all those kind of things. And since it's Christmas Day, and it's those rare moments where we meet on a Sunday on an actual day where everyone's talking about Jesus, let's turn in our Bibles. I'm not sure if this is going to be up there or not, but let's turn in our Bibles to Luke chapter 2, starting in verse 1. In those days, Caesar Augustus issued a decree that a census should be taken of the entire Roman world. This was the first census that took place while Quirinius was the governor of Syria, and everyone went to their own town to register. So Joseph also went up from the town of Nazareth to Galilee, to Judea, to Bethlehem, to the town of David, because he belonged to the house and the line of David. He went there to register with Mary, who was pledged to be married to him and was expecting a child. While they were there, the time came for this baby to be born, and she gave birth to her firstborn, a son. She wrapped him in cloths and placed him in the manger because there was no guest room available for people in the room. So here's the thing about Luke. Luke is an open gospel, especially for people who are skeptics. He writes this for people who are skeptics. And maybe you're here because somebody's paying for you Chinese buffet afterwards or something like that. Or maybe you're here because of it's Christmas Day, but you should consider at least that Luke was thinking about you. Luke is a first century historian. He is giving you dates and times and names and places. There's a very scholarly historian, a guy named Tom Holland, not Spider-Man, another Tom Holland, and he wrote a book called Dominion. He actually talked about how he's not a believer, but he talked about how when he was in college, his professor of first century Rome was talking about the most significant thing that happened in Caesar Augustus' reign. And his professor was also not a believer. And he was asking the class, what do you think the most significant event that happened in Caesar Augustus' reign was? And after they went back and forth with it, he said, this is a no-brainer. It's Jesus of Nazareth's birth. Do you think Caesar Augustus saw that coming? This person that he never met, that he never considered, the most significant thing that the most powerful person in the world that would happen in his reign would be something that he never knew about, but it marks his entire life. Luke, in the King James Version, it says that it came to pass in those days that there went out a decree from Caesar Augustus. And if you were to ask Caesar why it came to pass, he would have said, because I told it to. Because I lifted my finger, and people on the far reaches of the empire had to do what I said to do. But Luke, this first century historian, has a different idea in mind. He wants you to know that this couple is making their way back to the town of Bethlehem because unbeknownst to them or to Caesar Augustus or Quirinius, who issued the decree, God has bringing something about that has been in the works for thousands of years. And this God is going to reveal this to shepherds. Now, this is a really, really interesting thing because I was trying to think of a way to describe shepherd status in the ancient world today to you. And I thought about saying, well, people who don't have homes, people who don't have jobs, or I was trying to think of people who have absolutely no status because that's what shepherds were. The problem is Christmas has already done its work. And there's nobody to compare what shepherds would have been like because deep in your bones, no matter what you believe or don't believe, you believe everyone has inherent dignity and value. Shepherds didn't. Shepherds had no status whatsoever. And God shows up to the shepherds first This would have been, if you're trying to start a new world movement, this is a detail you leave out, unless their presence is a very part of the new world movement. Unless it being to them. And apparently God thought it was, because it was to those shepherds that angels appeared. And here's the scene in verse 8. And there were shepherds living out on a field nearby, keeping watch over their flocks at night. An angel of the Lord appeared to them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were terrified. But the angel said to them, "Do not be afraid. I bring you good news that will be cause for great joy for all people. Not just the Caesars, not just the kings, but for you. Today in the town of David, a Savior has been born to you. He is Messiah, the Messiah, the Lord. This will be a sign to you. You will find a baby wrapped in cloths and lying in a manger." Suddenly a great company of the heavenly host appeared with the angel, praising God and saying, "Glory to God in the highest heaven, and on earth peace to those on whom his favor rests." When the angels had left them and gone into heaven, the shepherds said to one another, "Let's go to Bethlehem and see this thing that has happened, which the Lord has told us about." So they hurried off, and they found Mary and Joseph and the baby who was lying in the manger. And when they saw him, they spread the word concerning what had been told them about this child. And all who heard it were amazed at what the shepherds said to them. What's interesting about this story is, you may hear this and think of, Charlie Brown scene or something. But there's a Catholic priest, a guy named Robert Barron, who actually points out that when angels appeared, first off in the Bible, everybody's always terrified. So don't go precious moments on this. This is like, this is the presence of a messenger of God that is unexpected. And angels are a big deal in the Christmas story. But the word the Bible uses to describe that is strateria. Let me hear you say strateria. It means like platoon or army. In other words, there is a war of Christmas. Not so much a war on Christmas. Christmas is a war. Like, here's the thing. Caesar, if you were to ask why it came to pass, why these people have to do it, it's because he's got a big army, right? But the Gospel of Luke opens up by letting you see something you don't normally see. There is a bigger army at work. And God is on the scene fighting for the people who don't have anybody fighting for them. And this is not a setback for God. That it comes through this peasant teenage couple, that it comes to the shepherds. It's not a setback for God. It is the strategy of God. God shows up not in Rome, the cultural capital, the political and most powerful place on the earth at the time. God doesn't show up in Rome. He doesn't even show up in Jerusalem. He shows up in Bethlehem. There's nothing in Bethlehem. It's like Pangburn. There's nothing in Bethlehem, right? It's a nowhere kind of place. Caesar thinks he's the one running the show. And every time you think that you're going to change your world by your vote and by, shooting somebody down on social media who disagrees with you or whatever, remember the Christmas story. There are other powers at work. And Luke is trying to say that God's purposes are always at work, always working. And that no matter who thinks they're in charge, this little baby is the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. I've been paying a lot of attention to Marvel movies. Like you just heard, a lot of people have. Marvel movies are a lot like the ancient world thought of religion. Superheroes, those kind of things. In fact, you'll notice that even in the myths, a lot of times they're using the ancient religions, like Thor, right? And the reason this is interesting is because there was a historian who pointed out recently that ancient people didn't have religion the way you do. No matter if you do or do not have religion, but, attending all the time, weekly, kind of moral with it. No, that wasn't the case. For the great Greek Roman myths, it was more like Marvel. It was not so much this is true. It was, why can't things be like this? And what's interesting about Christianity is that everywhere it went, they had this deep-seated assumption that they weren't bringing God with them. That God was already working. He always had been. They were just showing what God was like. That this deep-seated desire that is across human cultures and across human time, this desire that we have for the world to be a certain way, for people to be a certain way, actually comes from God, and this God stepped into human form around 3 AD. I wear a coin around my neck, and sometimes I pray with it. It is a coin minted by Pontius Pilate. My son, when I first got this, he said, "Do you mean this is from the first century? It's from the guy who was the governor of Judea. He's the guy who ultimately sentenced Jesus to die." This was in circulation in the lifetime of Jesus. And when my son first saw this, he said, "Do you mean God touched that?" I thought about it. I said, "No, he wasn't very big on money. But there's a really good chance God touched someone who touched this." There's no other religion that says something like what we're saying on Christmas Day. Jesus became one of us. Heaven came to earth. You can touch things that he might have touched. Jesus lived and died, and Caesar never heard of him. But Jesus was called by his disciples the Lord of Lords and King of Kings. After his resurrection, there was just a few hundred people that followed him. And some of them even doubted, according to the Gospel of Matthew. To call him Lord of Lords and King of Kings that first couple of weeks would have seemed laughable. And yet today we name our daughters Mary and our dogs Caesar. And it may be unbelievable to you. And so, Merry Christmas, I'm really glad you're here. But the undeniable truth is, every time you look at your phone, every time you open a calendar, every time you write a check, you are reminded of the undeniable truth that Jesus Christ has become the hinge of history, from darkness to light. Erwin McManus is a preacher in LA that I like a lot. And about a decade ago, he was in Afghanistan. He was doing some work with a nonprofit there, and people knew that he was a pastor. And so they asked him, "Hey, would you come talk to some people?" And he didn't know much about what he was walking into. But he walked into a room of 100 Muslim clerics. And he said there was an intensity and aggression in the room that you can only understand if you were in the room. And Erwin McManus was trying to be very gracious and kind to these men who had invited him in to talk about his nonprofit. And he kept using the word gospel. And at one point, one of the Muslim clerics raised their hand and said, "What is this word gospel that you keep bringing up?" And he said, I thought about it for a second, and I said, "There once was a man who loved a woman. And he loved her deeply and truly. And when he went to ask her for her hand in marriage, for a variety of reasons, it cost him his life. Because that is what true love looks like. But he could not have sent a letter. And he could not have sent a messenger. Because in matters of love, only the lover can convey the message." And that is what I mean when I talk about the gospel. That is what Christmas is. Christians believe that at the heart of the universe is eternal, self-donating, self-giving love. And that humans, we're complicated. We live in rebellion to God. So much so that we're not even sure God exists. And if he does, if he's good. And so the Christmas story is God's way of saying, I love you enough to come in this vulnerable, fragile way just to show you what I'm like. Because in matters of love, only the lover can convey the message.